Welcome to the channel for the future caretakers of resurrected species. Welcome to the Paleo-Zoo-Keepers Association.
Oh, hello there. Welcome to the Paleo-Zoo-Keeper Association. My name is Austin. As many of you know, I definitely love the concept of resurrecting extinct species and being able to take care of them in the 21st century. From dinosaurs to caligatheres and so forth, which I've covered a lot in this channel. I definitely love the concept. However, as much as I do like this, I personally believe that if we're really going to be able to really resurrect any kind of animal, it needs to be an animal that has died out recently and or can be able to integrate into the modern ecology without destroying it. This is where rewilding comes into play. For those of you who are new to my channel, I have covered a potential rewilding of a resurrected species, the dodo. Check up in my channel. You'll see. Another animal that is a great potential for rewilding, if it's resurrected, is the famous woolly mammoth, the famous hairy elephant icon of the Ice Age. Since this animal has died out so recently, like the last individuals died like sometime after the pyramids were made, thousands of years ago, and there have living relatives, the Asian elephants living today, it's possible that we could be able to resurrect these animals and be able to reintroduce them back to the wild. However, we first will need to resurrect them first. So, how do we do it? Now, the topic of resurrecting the woolly mammoth is definitely not something new. It's been talked about many, many times throughout YouTube and scientific channels. But I feel that we should at least go over these ways of resurrecting the mammoth, because I believe that this will definitely affect how the woolly mammoth project will go, its future, its duration, everything. So let's get into it. The first proposal on resurrecting the woolly mammoth is, of course, by cloning. For those of you who don't know, cloning goes as this. The process would involve that you get a cell from the animal that you wish to clone, or have a replica of, get the DNA from the donor animal cells, and then you insert it into the egg or oocyte where its own DNA has been removed. And once you stimulate it, mostly likely via electricity, the egg would develop into an embryo, which will produce an exact genetic replica of the animal that you wish to clone. Now, there are pros and cons about cloning. One pro is that you would get a nuclearly pure woolly mammoth. Now, mind you that I said nuclearly speaking, because when you're cloning animals, you're basically cloning the animal from their nuclear DNA. Their mitochondrial DNA will be a different story. That's going to be within the egg of the female that you're going to use. Basically, we all get our mitochondrial DNA from females, from our mothers. So there is that. You'll get a pretty pure mammoth, at least as close as you can. Unless you could be able to get mammoth eggs, but that's going to be a little tough, but I'll get to that a little shortly. You'd be able to get a completely pure mammoth that is very scientifically valuable. You could really know what they look like, you really know what they are really like and such. But this is where this pretty much gets to cons, because cloning it has improved a lot in some recent years, but it's still very, very tricky. Even though the description I said it makes it look simple, it's actually pretty tricky, because even though you do that, you will still have to do this again and again and again to at least increase your chances. In fact, the famous cloned mammal, the very first cloned mammal, Dahlia's sheep, she was the the success after over 200 tries, 200 failures. So, yeah, it's improved today, but still iffy. And there's also reproduction of elephants. The elephant reproduction, and I'll get to this much. I'll get this later in the video. Elephant reproduction is pretty finicky and makes it very hard to transfer an embryo into it. I'll get to that later. But the next, and this is the biggest one, is that for cloning, you need intact DNA from the woolly mammoth. Now, we got a lot of frozen carcasses of the woolly mammoth found in Siberia, but due to how, even with all the frozen colds, and even though cold does help with preserving DNA, even then, there's processes in the preserving the carcasses, like ammonia coming from the body, which actually would degrade DNA. You do get DNA, mind you, but the DNA is really degraded. You can't really just do a clone. Funnily enough, actually turns out bones with the bone marrow in it preserve DNA much better than the carcasses do. However, even though the cloning option is out, there is still enough genetic material found from the woolly mammoth to be able to go for the next option, genetic engineering. Basically, we do have genetic material to not clone them, but we can modify the living relative of the woolly mammoth, the Asian elephant, with that of the woolly mammoth DNA to make them as close to the woolly mammoth as possible. One genetic modifying tool that we can use for this is CRISPR, or Clustered Regularly Interspaced Short Palindromic Repeats. Basically, in layman's terms, it is the cut and paste of genetic engineering, replacing the genes for one thing and replacing them with the genes of the woolly mammoth. In the case of genetic modifying Asian elephants to woolly mammoths, basically make them as hairy, make them have layers of blubber, and be able to have antifreeze hemoglobin in their bloodstream. And that's just simply a minor part. There's a lot more to it, but that's a start. This process, or way to resurrect a mammoth, would be relatively easier than trying to clone one. We can modify the Asian elephants to have all the traits possible from the woolly mammoth. And, we've actually already done that. We have already genetically modified elephants, Asian elephant cells to have mammoth genes, and we even done enough to be able to get grow a woolly mammoth meatball. This is definitely possible. However, this does run into the same problem as the one with cloning. Embryo transfer. Gotta get the embryo inside of the Asian elephant. This is definitely going to be tricky because elephants have a very unique reproductive system. They, like most animals, they have a hymen to be around the reproductive area. But here's the thing. It has a hole in it that's small enough to only allow sperm to go through. If anything bigger, it will just rip it. And in fact, the hymen doesn't even rip until when the elephant's giving birth. So if we try to poke holes into that, it might compromise the pregnancy. So yeah, while using genetic engineering can definitely help, we still have that other issue. Another possible route to resurrect the mammoth without compromising the pregnancy is through artificial insemination. We've actually been able to do this with elephants today quite successfully in recent years. And with the hole in the hymen only allowing sperm to go through, it would definitely not compromise the pregnancy. Now, there are two ways we can go this artificial insemination route. One way that we could be able to do artificial insemination is to look in the mammoth carcasses and get sperm. Get the sperm and then use it to impregnate a female elephant. Now, most people would think that hybrids are always sterile, but sometimes that's not always the case. Like, for example, even though mules are known to be sterile, there are times that when a female mule can be able to reproduce or can be able to have a foal as long as it was bred back to a stallion or a male donkey. A stallion's a male horse. Well, that principle also goes to other hybrids as well, like female ligers bred with male tigers, you get tie ligers, or you go the opposite direction with female ligers and male lions, you get ligers, and so on and so forth. And as long as you keep doing it to the females, you could be able to have this done. But like I said before, there are challenges. One problem is that if you're able to try to breed an Asian elephant with a woolly mammoth bull sperm, there are times that you might not be able to get a pregnancy. Like, for example, cattle and water buffalo hybrids have been tried, but the embryos don't live after a certain time. Another problem would be that there are unforeseen hybridization issues between mammoths and elephants. For example, when ligers are conceived, you have to make certain they have a cesarean section ready for the tigress when the time comes, because the liger cubs can get too big for the tigress to be able to pass them. And also there could be potential health issues and so on and so forth. And not to mention, at the same time, you're going to have to keep breeding the female hybrids with mammoth sperm to be able to get a more pure mammoth after every generation. There are two challenges with this. One is that the elephant's reproductive system and growth makes it really tricky, because the gestation of an elephant would take 22 months, practically 2 years, for the calf to be born. And depending on the species, like elephants can reach sexual maturity when they're between 10 to 15 years old. So this would definitely affect things. And if I remember correctly, woolly mammoths can reach sexual maturity close to 15 years, much like African elephants. And you put that in perspective, 15 years, and it would take 4 generations of backbreeding to get a pure woolly mammoth, or at least close to pure. And you see, let's see now, 15, times 4. If we're lucky, that would be 60 years before you could be able to get a pure blood woolly mammoth. And also the other issue, genetic diversity. If you're lucky to find at least one woolly mammoth with sperm that's intact to use, you're going to need to find a lot of other sperm of other mammoths to be able to use, so that you can have a good genetic diversity and no issues that are related to inbreeding. So going it by this route would definitely not be a good idea. There is another way we can use artificial insemination in order to be able to do this properly without compromising the health of the elephant. One is to use embryonic chimeras. Now, for those you don't know, embryonic chimeras is basically a life form that's created when you fuse two embryos together when in the early stages, so that the individual animal can have different parts of the body that have the genetic material of the two different individuals. This has happened several times with animals and even people too. One woman who was giving birth to kids, where they did a DNA test. Turns out they're saying that they're not their kids. It turns out she actually has the reproductive cells of a twin that she was fused with when she was an embryo. And this actually has even been done with other animals. This has happened with animals, especially in the laboratory, where they have sheep and goats, or chimeras that basically have parts of sheep and goats. And this is even what's important for this is they have a chimeras, like a rooster that has the reproductive cells of a cory bustard, an endangered species of bird from India. Now, this was done to be able to have the rooster be able to produce sperm that could be used to artificially inseminate female cory bustards to help the species. This has been able to be successful. Granted that most of the eggs didn't make it, but at least one chick was hatched, with probably a second one as well. But the thing is that it could work. Now, what about the woolly mammoth? Well, we couldn't be without embryo transfers. We can't be able to do this with elephants, and like, we could be able to do embryo transfers. We don't really need to do chimerization at all. So, I theorize that we could be able to have a domesticated animal like a cow, a horse, a pig, anything that has one of the domesticated animals that we both do a lot of reproductive technology on and are able to collect semen from, and B, and this is actually important, that has a core body temperature that is reminiscent of that of elephants, because sperm is very sensitive about temperature. So if you can be able to find a domesticated animal that has easy accessible sperm, that can get sperm easily, especially in good quantities, to AI an elephant, that has a body temperature very similar to an elephant, or at least the environment's similar, then it could be done. And I say we do this, and then we could be able to collect the sperm from the chimera when the elephant's in heat, and be able to artificially inseminate. There's even works for genetic diversity as time goes on. Like, as time goes on, you could be able to genetically modify cells and embryos to have different genetic expressions to basically have a genetic diversity, and then you can use them to make more embryonic chimeras that you can then use their sperm to inseminate the female hybrids to be able to continue on. Now, I know this will still give us probably like 60 years worth of work, and it's most likely that it's going to be a long project, and any female elephants that we use cannot come from an AZA accredited facility, but probably from from a private facility, or maybe even rescues from circuses will probably be the best way to do it. But until we could be able to figure out how to do embryo transfers into elephants safely without compromising the pregnancy and putting both the calf and the mother in danger, this is the best option that I believe that we can do. Hello, guys. This is me later on. As I was doing research for this video, I've often been told that converting elephant stem cells into other cells like sperm was considered next to impossible. However, recently, Colossal Biosciences was able to achieve this, be able to convert stem cells of elephants into sperm. This is incredible. Like I said before, as I was researching for this, I was often told that it was impossible, or even like unable to be done, but they were able to do it. Of course, currently doing it right now is expensive, but this shows that it can be done. Now, how to incorporate this into my idea, my theory? Well, we could be able to convert the modified elephant cells, modified mammoth genes, into sperm, and perhaps even to make them be able to AI the elephants that way. Although this would definitely work, I still think we should probably consider using embryonic chimeras, not disinclude them, because we're going to need to make a good amount of sperm in order to artificially inseminate the elephants, and not just in a petri dish. But still, this is incredible and something that should be considered. But regardless of how you resurrect the mammoth, you definitely will need a herd of Asian elephants. Now, like I mentioned before, it's most likely that AZA-accredited or accredited zoological facilities of any sort would be less than willing to offer their precious herd of Asian elephant cows for such a project, especially such a long project. Most likely, you're going to need to source them from a more private sector, from like private zoos or private facilities, or maybe even rescues from circuses. But regardless of where they're from, you have to make certain that the elephant herd you have is a family group, at least related to each other, and are at least in good relations with each other. Elephants are very intelligent and they're highly social. They need positive family bonds in order to be able to be healthy, both physically and mentally. And this will definitely be important for the mammoth calves in the future, so that they can be taken care of by their mother, aunts, sisters, well, sisters in a sense, and their grandmother. So they would, they will learn how to be elephants, or at least be social as elephants, from their from their herd, and you definitely need to be a good environment for them. And for the facility, you gotta make sure that it's spacious enough. Make sure it's good. It's safe enough. It's happy enough. Make certain that it's a good environment. Has all the facilities you need, and also make certain that it has of course, have enough space. And for future rewilding purposes, be able to have the elephants be able to be exposed to wilderness areas, similar to like sanctuaries, so that not only this will enrich the elephants' lives, but it'll also give the mammoth calves a little bit of a foretaste of what they're supposed to do later on. Well, I mean, obviously, the first generation of mammoths won't go to the wild. You'll need to have a larger population before you ever think of reintroducing them to the wild. But they'll at least be able to have a bit of a taste of what to expect, or at least be able to know what to expect and how to teach their future calves that. So all in all, you need to make certain that the environment in question is good for the elephants and the calves. Now, when you're able to have a good enough population of captive woolly mammoths, this is where you could be able to start trying to think of how to reintroduce them to the wild. Now, reintroducing elephants in the wild is a very complex process. It would include teaching the mammoth calves how to find resources and a predator awareness, make certain they don't become food. It could be done in several phases in order to acclimatize the calves to live in a life of independence and problem solving. This is where, like what I mentioned earlier, large spaces that are exposed to like some wilderness areas, like forests with trees, grasses, and such, so that they could be able to know how to forage, and make certain they are enriched immensely, so that they can at least know how to problem solve, and how to figure things out, stuff like that. There are some facilities in Africa that one could be able to take a note of when trying to rewild the woolly mammoth calves, such as the Retiti and Sheldrake elephant orphanages in Kenya, where they are able to condition orphan elephant calves that have been orphaned from poachers to be able to be released back to the wild when they are older. So taking a note off of these facilities would definitely be of help. But once you're able to have a plan on how to rewild the mammoths, the next step is, well, location. Initial locations to start the rewilding process should be in areas that have significant amount of wilderness acreage, that have plants that they will most likely encounter in the wild. In this case of Eurasia, mostly leaning to the Asia side, like in northern Russia and Siberia, and also that is a considerable distance from civilization, far enough so that they will get less issues with the people, but close enough to provide emergency services when needed. If you're going to do, there are many nature reserves in Europe, North America, and Asia, as well as the UK, and in Europe that is, that could have a good starting point for captive mammoths. For the sake of this video, I will mostly focus on 3 locations in particular. Now, mind you, these 3 locations are mostly in Russia and Siberia, as an example. If you guys have any ideas on where in Europe and North America where could be good places to rewild and reintroduce woolly mammoths, let me know in the comment section down below. Now, before I get into these locations, why should we reintroduce the woolly mammoth back today? Well, just like elephants, mammoths are ecosystem or environment engineers. In places like Asia and Africa, they've been known to be able to topple over trees, which will give other plants a chance to grow, like grasses and so on. And not only this helps plants, according to one scientist, it is believed that these mammoths' activities of engineering the environment would perhaps be able to help with greenhouse gases from being emitted from the ground. With their activities, it will be able to diminish the amount of greenhouse gases emitted from the ground. So this is the main reason of why rewilding woolly mammoths would be essential for the environment. Now we got that out of the way, let's get on to the first location. One location, which is called the Wild Field, is a nature reserve near the cities of Tula in the Tula Oblast in the European part of Russia, approximately 250 kilometers or 150 miles south of Moscow. It will be able to provide a model of an unregulated steppe ecosystem, looked like how it was before the event of humans. Currently, it's 280 hectares, eventually planning to become 500. Currently, it's too small for the mammoths, but it could be able to become larger by the time the mammoths are ready. And according to weather reports, approximately about 703 milliliters or 27.7 inches of rain a year, which means that if the reserve reaches only a couple thousand hectares, it will be able to support a good amount of mammoths. Basically, for example, depending on with that rainfall, 5,000 hectares can support 21 mammoths with that much rain. It is also situated near a federal road and railroad station and is accessible to the general public. This makes it easier to access and establish facilities, transportation technology, and medical emergencies for the mammoths. And it'll probably even bring a little income for tours, like for safari tours and education on the project. Now, the second area that would be a good place to reintroduce woolly mammoths when they're ready is actually the Pleistocene Park, located in a remote part of Siberia. This park has pretty much been the brainchild of Sergei Zimov, who is the one who proposed on bringing back the woolly mammoths to be able to help combat climate change. Anyway, this wilderness preserve is basically 160 square kilometers or 16,000 hectares, surrounded by 600 square kilometers or 60,000 hectares buffer area that will be added when the animals are successfully established themselves. And animals as in like horses, bison, muskoxen, other animals that have already been established in this preserve. And also, with what will be available, which will be 760 square kilometers or 76,000 hectares, and between 200 and 250 milliliters of annual rain, Currently, with all that, the Pleistocene Park can only be able to support around 7 mammoths with the smaller area, and with the whole area, just over 38 mammoths. With the surrounding area added on. Now, for the third location, this is going to be interesting and fascinating because this area is isolated enough that it can be able to protect the mammoths from poachers. It's already a very well protected nature preserve, and not only does it actually does have the ability to keep mammoths in a good population, but it's shown that it has been able to do that in the past. This third location, if I'm going to mention for this video, will be the famous Wrangel Island off the coast of northern Siberia. Thanks to its mountainous terrain, it's able to make valleys that actually replicate the mammoth steppe that used to be there. So, and it's been able to support about 500 to 1,000 woolly mammoths for its whole time. So, this island is perfect to be able to contain these mammoths, keep them safe from the outside world, and it's very spacious for them. But even though it's perfect, and for some reasons, it won't be completely safe. Or at least not for the same reason you're thinking. I'll explain. One challenge that the woolly mammoth will face on Wrangel Island is that the island itself is actually has the world's largest breeding population of polar bears in one place, basically polar bear breeding ground. And while even the largest polar bear can't exactly do anything to a fully grown mammoth, they could definitely be able to get a mammoth calf if given the chance. So when you're conditioning them to be rewild, definitely want to emphasize on predator avoidance. So you definitely need to take that into consideration. And another thing to consider is grazing capacity. Now, mind you, I did say that it has carried 500 to 1,000 mammoths throughout its lifetime. But also, basically, the island's estimated carrying capacity of these mammoths would be basically between 100, could be like 149 to up to 819 mammoths, at least currently. But along with this, you also need to consider reindeer and musk oxen that are already on the island, and that could probably change things. So these are things to take into consideration. Along with these, there are also other issues that the mammoths on Wrangel Island would face. Like, for one, due to it being an island off the coast of Siberia, off the northern coast of Siberia, it is immensely isolated. So, transporting mammoths from the mainland to the island or from the island to the mainland will be tricky. So, definitely needs a plan on that. Helicopters and or boats are definitely going to be something to consider. So now a lot of infrastructure, at least in case of the woolly mammoths. There's also all the politics that go on in Russia and Siberia. So yeah, that's going to be a hassle. And also, the precipitation of Wrangel Island is considerably lower than that of than that of the Pleistocene Park I mentioned before, with the precipitation of 139 to 148 milliliters of precipitation a year. So there is definitely that. And also, while genetics would most likely not be an issue like it was for the Wrangel Island mammoths of the past, one thing that a lot of scientists believe that contributed to the extinction is, along with inbreeding and genetics, it was also a very harsh rain on snow icing event that happened on the island that pretty much froze all the water and preventing the mammoths from getting a good drink of water could possibly still happen. So this is something to definitely consider. And one other problem that the Wrangel Island mammoths would face, which also will lead us to the other issues that reintroduced mammoths would face, is that it's been announced in 2014 that a future possible Russian Navy base is going to be set up there. So there is a possibility that there's going to be probably some conflicts between the reintroduced woolly mammoths and the naval base. Although in theory, this probably could have some good deals because there could be some more infrastructure and maybe military could be able to help with moving the mammoths from back and forth between the mainland and the island. So there's that possibility. But also, we also got to consider all the human ordeals that mammoths are going to face once they are resurrected and reintroduced back to the wild. From what we understand about human-elephant conflicts in Africa and parts of Asia, we can definitely get that one of the conflicts that mammoths and humans will face with each other is that elephants, like mammoths, like elephants, would definitely like to go after human crops every now and then, because they will it'll be like a nice treat, or if a habitat gets degraded. So there's definitely going to be that issue, and even if there's enough food, there's always a chance of elephants trampling over the crops for migrations, and also this would definitely be a big one. Bull mammoths when they get into the musk, they will just attack anything and everything. They'll go after vehicles. They will go after tractors. They will go after livestock. The Asian elephants have been known to kill cattle or livestock that were tied up in farms, and they will even go after people. And also, back on the food deal, they could definitely just demolish mills and areas buildings where farmers store food. So there is definitely going to be issues there. And there's a lot of oil pipes up in Russia and Siberia. So there is definitely the possibility of mammoth bulls demolishing them as well. So that would definitely get them in conflict with oil companies. And along with farms and villages, there's also going to be a lot of conflict with nomadic groups of people that live in the Arctic and Siberia, especially the most remote places. One of the people that would definitely be affected by this are the Dolgans. They are nomadic reindeer herders that live in a lot of parts of Siberia. Pretty much always nomadic, going wherever there's good grazing for their reindeer and their little mobile homes. With these people, it will definitely be a big change for them. For the mammoths will both compete with their reindeer for grazing, and there's always a chance of, especially a bull mammoth in musk will come up and demolish their homes in the dead of winter. So this will definitely affect them immensely. One other problem that the resurrected woolly mammoths will face once they're rewild and brought into the wilderness is the problem that practically most elephants in the world in the wild face, and that is ivory. The ivory trade, especially the illegal variety. As anyone who's looked at conservation or know anything about elephants know that the elephants today are suffering terribly from ivory hunters and poachers. Well, poachers in general. And it's no doubt that the woolly mammoth, especially the resurrected woolly mammoths, once they're reintroduced to the wild, will face the same problem. Especially since they got the large tusk compared to all living species of elephants. But mammoth, especially in Russia and Siberia, this is where it's going to get tricky. Because there's already a mammoth ivory trade in those countries. But mind you, this is actually from the ivory from fossils that that hunters have found and fishermen and such have found, and it's perfectly legal because, well, by one logic is that they're already dead, so no need to worry about that. But of course, this is going to be changed once the mammoth gets resurrected. Now, before we automatically go to that, let's make it illegal as soon as the mammoths are born. This will definitely not work, especially not for the mammoths. And this is mostly because of how people are. Because in Russia and Siberia, the poverty rates are really, really high, like higher than most of our developed countries in the West. So, and to a lot of people, especially those who live in like wilderness areas and such, they are able to raise themselves out of poverty through this. So if you suddenly take that away from them, then that's going to make people very resentful, and that's going to be a lot more of a hassle than anything else. And not only will the mammoth hunters be affected, but also nomadic people like the Dolgans that I mentioned before will be affected too, because when they find these mammoth tusks, they would use them to like carve them for tools and buttons that they need, or use them as barter since cash is not that important out there. And so if you automatically make it illegal, not only will these mammoth hunters or these impoverished people will be affected, but also the Dolgans will be affected too. And like I mentioned before, politics in Russia and Siberia can be very messy. So yeah. So I would propose that if there will need to be regulations, but one regulation I think that will probably help out the most is a DNA testing. Because the resurrected woolly mammoths are not going to be purebred woolly mammoths. They're going to be mostly like Asian elephants that have been modified immensely with mammoth DNA versus the purebred mammoth, which there is they share a good chunk of the DNA, but they still that bit of a difference. I would propose that to make a regulation is that if anyone wants to be able to cash in some mammoth tusks they supposedly found, they will need to take a sample from the tusk to be able to DNA test it to see that if it's from a purebred woolly mammoth from prehistory, then it could be able to be sold off or whatever needs to be done. But if it's definitely proven that both it came from a genetically resurrected mammoth, and also kind of correlates with any reports of poached woolly mammoths that might have been reported, then some law enforcement actions will probably need to be taken. But we can't just do it just automatically right away. Like I mentioned earlier in the video, once from the mammoths first being born to the mammoths finally being reintroduced back to the wild, that will take decades before that could happen. So by the time the first mammoth is born, I propose that we do a very slow progress, a transition of sorts, so that people can start getting used to this new system before the mammoths get reintroduced to the wild. I know, like, some people would say that's not a good thing, but if you do the very knee-jerk reaction of making mammoth ivory legal like that so suddenly, especially in these impoverished countries, you're gonna meet resentment and resistance, and Don't start a war where there doesn't need to be a war. Because if you try to go war against humanity, you're just gonna lose, and the animals are gonna suffer. But if you work with people, like good conservation groups do, you work with people, then you can be able to make success. At least that's what I think, and I hope that we could be able to do, so we can have the mammoths in a world where we could be able to coexist. But there are situations that, just like it is in Asia and Africa with modern day elephants, where it's impossible in a certain location due to poachers and conflicts with farms. There will be times where you have to move the mammoths around. Using technology or transport technology that we do with modern day elephants, like these cranes here that I'm showed with specialized trucks, and even using helicopters and airplanes, could definitely be able to help to move the mammoths around when you need to. So definitely look up research on for using the same vehicles used to move elephants in South Africa, where they're renowned for this, and parts of Asia. But of course, definitely need to make these vehicles more adapted for the Arctic conditions, whether it's the sludge, damp part of the summer, or the freezing cold of winter. So this sort of research will need to be done. So as I mentioned, resurrecting, rewilding, and reintroducing the mammoths into the 21st century is going to be a very big, very long, and if not difficult process. So this will take a lot of investment, planning, time, and money in order to make it work. But if we're able to make this work, then we could be able to bring this creature that has most likely helped our ancestors to survive a good second chance in life into our future. If you're here right now, thank you for watching the video. This was definitely a long video, longer than I anticipated it to be, and making it took a lot longer than I anticipated as well. I am sorry that I wasn't able to get this posting at the same time as the other elephant video, but thank you. But for those who have messaged to me, I thank you for understanding. There's a lot of what's going on over here, and it definitely takes a lot of my time, but I was glad I was able to get great support from you guys and was able to get to this video. Rewilding the mammoth has always been a topic I've always been fascinated on, so it was good. It was pretty fun to get into it. The next video coming up later this month is on tending to the Piscobalina, which is basically a small species of baleen whale from the Cetothere family. This will be the first marine video I do, so I'm really excited for this one. And then the next video later in April will be on the Hyaenodon, specifically Hyaenodon horridus, and it will cover a couple of very specific welfare concerns for the Hyaenodon. I can't wait to show you these videos, and I hope you all have a grand day. Adios!